music then. Welcome everybody to the meeting of Mayor and Council. If you'll rise for the invocation by Councilman King.
We can bow our heads, please. Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, just thank you for this beautiful day today, Lord. Just thank you for all the blessings that you have given to each and every one of us, Lord. Just thank you for the opportunity for us to be here tonight and serve our community, Lord. And Lord, just continue to keep this meeting and our city lifted up, Lord. And at the end of the day, we just give you all the praise and glory and honor. We ask all these blessings in your wonderful and glorious name. Amen.
Amen. This man standing for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May you be seated. Okay, as a reminder to council, we will have an executive session tonight following our regular meeting. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, sir, there are not.
Okay, you've all received the minutes from our last meeting. If there are no questions or comments, I'll accept a motion to receive the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
We have a motion from Councilman Holland. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I'll second.
Second from Councilman McCoy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, do we have any correspondence this week?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, all right, we're going to go on to new business number one. I want to call up Mr. Chris Sims to walk through. If council remembers, we had looked at a rate increase back during the budget. That did not go through. We were asked to pull together some rate retail and do some research on all of our rates. And Mr. Sims is here to present tonight. So thank you so much, Chris, for being here.
Yes, no, thank you for having me. Yes, so as you mentioned, there was a need for an adjustment out of the budget period for a payroll increase to retain some of the skilled employees that we have on the utility side of the city's operations. And so in order to ensure that we've still got appropriate funds to cover our general fund and our utilities expenses, we were going to look at the retail rates for both the electric and the water and sewer utilities. So focusing on just the electric one at first, the last rate adjustment that we did was in 2020, and we had taken that back to a period of, looked back all the way back to 2011. That was really the last time that the electric rates were increased for for operating expenses, not for the increase in the bond payment that we had several years ago. So looking at the rates really from 2011 in terms of, are we making whole in terms of keeping up with the increases in the operating expenses since then versus today. So the first aspect of the electric department budget is the increase due to the salaries, and that is what's displayed on page 2 of the electric committee report. Down at the bottom, you can see broken out by fund how much each department is responsible for the increases in cost. And so the electric department is about $105,000 for the increase in payroll expenses. Looking at the next page is where we focus on the history going back to 2011. So these are all of our operating expenses since 2011. For the electric department, it was about $1.5 million. So this is taking out power supply costs, because power supply costs are collected through the PCAC, and we adjust that every year depending on what the DMAC costs are. So that's calculated and collected separately from what we would typically call base rates, which collect for the operating expenses. So the expenses at that time were $1.5 million. You can see in column C, those expenses have increased $600,000 just for 2021. Now those aren't audited figures yet, but those are based on the general ledger expenses for the previous fiscal year. Looking forward to 2022, in column D, you can see it's anticipated to go up to almost $2.4 million, and by adding in the $105,000 for the additional payroll expenses, it's getting quick approaching the $2.5 million. So it's almost $1 million short relative to where we were back in 2011, collecting for our operating expenses. So if we were to, we can offset that by some increase in retail sales and customer growth. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, there was a lot of loss of commercial load several years ago. So there hasn't been a significant increase in retail sales, essentially, for the electric side. However, that's quickly changing. There are more commercial developments and residential coming online that could add to that to the future to help offset the almost $1 million increase in operating expenses. It's only an additional $100,000 or so, roughly, from the increase in retail sales for the last decade. So that total increase for the electric department as a whole is what's displayed on the next page. So page 4, if we were to increase the rates only to cover the $105,000 for the increase in payroll, that's an 0.8% increase in customers' bills. If we were to go with, after discussion with the electric committee, the second option is if we were to collect just basically the increases in the payroll expenses in total from 2011, it's roughly almost a 3% increase in rates. And so the thought was to tie that to what the half of the increase in the cost of living adjustment for 2022 is. So the full cost of living adjustment increase is 5.9%. And the thought was to basically cut that in half for this second option. So it would be an increase to customers of 2.95%. So that's where that comes from. That's roughly the same increase in the total payroll expenses since 2011. The last option is if we were to basically make the full increase necessary to make us whole based on the 2022 budget, that would be the $860,000, and that's roughly 6.5% increase to customers. And you can see how essentially the dollars are broken out by each rate class, by each option. So to put this into context, if we go with the second middle option, the 2.95% increase, this next page 5 shows a graph of the total average bill for a residential customer in Seaford, going all the way back to that 2011, that last increase that was for, it was a $1 million increase in operating margin at that time. I know there are some increases in costs there as we go along and travel across to today's time period. However, that's really focused on, there can be some pretty significant changes in power supply costs year to year. In fact, I believe it was right around $92 a megawatt hour in 2011, and it's down to about $71, $72 a megawatt hour now, which is what explains how we were able to decrease rates. So essentially today, it's 12.5% less than what it was in 2011, the total rates for an average residential customer. So even if we were to implement the 2.5% increase, it's still 10% below what it was in 2011 because of those power supply costs coming down. And the city was able to reduce those rates and increase the collection for the debt service almost 1-for-1. That was about $675,000 a year. So the margins have increased to cover that debt service, but the rates have been able to come down for customers. So so page 6 then focuses on if we were to do just an across-the-board increase, which is without doing any additional rate maintenance like we did last year. Last year we did a $5 increase to the customer charge because there was a long process coming. It was probably 2008 when we first implemented a customer charge. Everything was first 45 kilowatt hours initially. And then the minimum bill was set at $15. And there are numerous studies, cost of service studies performed that show that the fixed cost collection for an electric utility of our size would be in the $20, $30 plus range. So we're currently at $15 today. And so if we were to apply the increase on just a percentage basis to every single rate, so the customer charge would go up the 2.95%, each individual per kilowatt hour charge would go up by 2.95%. If we were to do that, that's what it would look like for each of these options, essentially. So there would still be some increase in the customer charge. You can see for residential, that's on line 2. You know, if we go with the option 2 from the recommendation of the electric committee, then it'd be a 97-cent increase to the customer charge. I mean, still well below all of the cost of service study information that's typically available today. And so that shows, the following page shows what it would be for the remaining rate classes, MGS through LGS primary as well, doing it strictly on a percentage basis. And so the page 8 shows where our customer charges are in relationship to neighboring utilities. And you can see that there's already DEC, Smyrna, Milford, and well, Clayton's $35 minimum bill. But even DEC, Smyrna, and Milford all have cost of service studies that show $21 customer charges, and they are working towards those levels. They've got 3- and 5-year increases planned for their customer charge to get them up from what's currently $16 up to $21. And so Seaford's really in the middle of the pack. Like I said, we did a $5 increase last year, and the benefit to that goes to the average residential customer, essentially because with working that customer charge, getting it up to an appropriate level, that means the larger usage customers were essentially subsidizing the very small usage customers. And we identified at the time that the small usage customers, the ones that are affected by big minimum bill and big customer charge changes, are not the typical customer. An average residential uses about 900 kilowatt hours a month. Even if it was a very small single bedroom apartment, it's still going to use 400 kilowatt hours a month. To use 45, it's really an on-off reading. It's tied to a shed maybe or a garage. It's really a very odd customer, one-off really for those type of customers. So it would give, the benefit is that the average customer wouldn't see as large an increase if we make another rate maintenance adjustment to the customer charge. And so that's what's shown on the following 3 pages, walks through each of the 3 options. You know, option 1, which was just the 0.8% increase to customers. If we did a $3 increase in the customer charge to $18, then the overall class impact is the 0.8%. However, the average residential customer using 900 kilowatt hours is only going to see a 0.3% increase in their bill. And that's really to show, the second page is, like I said, the option that's being recommended by the electric committee. If we did a $5 increase in the customer charge, yes, it does show that people that use between 0 and 50 kilowatt hours are going to see a 30% increase in their bill. You know, it's going to be a little over $5. The average customer, instead of seeing the 2.95% increase, would be about 2.5% increase in their rates. And so the additional work papers are really it's just the revenue proofs for each of the different options, whether it wanted to be across the board or if we want to do additional changes to the customer charge. Because if we make a change to the residential customer charge, which we're recommending here, we would also do that for the SGS non-demand customers as well. Basically similar to what we did last year. So I'll open it up if there's any questions.
Well, first, thank you for your detailed report. I did want to ask Councilman McCoy, was there any comments from the electric committee that you would want to share with the group?
I will share, for starters, Mr. Sims, great presentation tonight. Also, great presentation for the board. Did a great job of illustrating different options for them. We were in here for about 2 hours, a long meeting. So the board really took it seriously, put their heads together, and I think the general consensus was that we know that there's more to be done, but this is generally a step in the right direction. The boards were very understanding that there are a lot of people in this community that are on a fixed income, and a lot of people are still adapting to life as we're coming out of a pandemic. So whereas this may not be the ultimate answer, again, it's a step in the right direction. We're moving forward. So hopefully that's a good way of paraphrasing their thoughts.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any questions from council for Mr. Sims in regards to the electric report? Councilman King?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Sims, you keep alluding to a rate increase that hasn't happened since 2011. I remember my first term as a councilman, there was a rate adjustment made probably, 2018, 2017 to electric.
So there was, in 2018, there was actually a $100,000 reallocation, I would call it. It was a reduction in the electric residential rates specifically. And then it was supposed to be made up in the water and sewer side. Now, I don't believe that the rates on the water and sewer side were increased to account for that $100,000. But like I said, there was an increase, and very significantly for the collection of the debt service that we knew we would be taking on, and we were able to accomplish that without actually increasing the rates to customers, rather than passing through what would have been a reduction in the DMAC wholesale cost through the PCAC normal process. Rather than give that reduction to the customers, the city needed to retain it to cover the cost of the annual debt service expense going forward for the infrastructure bond that they took out.
And by doing that, by not making that adjustment and giving that credit back to the consumer, what was the revenue that was generated?
Yeah, it was about $675,000 at the time. It's down a little bit because sales aren't as high as they were at that point, because it was a per kilowatt hour rate that was put into base rates, and so it's probably about $640,000 or so a year now. And the debt service cost is almost right on par. It's about $630,000 a year for the debt service payment.
And so what would happen if we made no adjustment? What does that look like?
So if we were to make no adjustment, then the funds that are available to be transferred to the general fund are generally a fallout each year, and the electric department is the one that provides basically 95% of the value. Sometimes water and sewer can contribute to it, but it's not a lot, definitely by comparison. That transfer to the general fund it's about $2.7 million a year now. And so by having this increased expenses, if we do not increase the rates to the customers on the electric side, then that would likely be the first candidate. It would have to reduce what's being transferred to the general fund each year to cover the police and other items that could be handled by taxes, but you know, and this is a long-term decision of the city a long time ago, that, you know, to keep the tax rates low, it would be collected via essentially the utilities departments to offset a lot of the general fund expenses each year.
And what percent of the general fund would you say the electric department generates total assets?
I off the top of my head, I don't know for certain the total revenues on the general fund side, but I believe it's probably half.
2.7.
Is it 2.7 total?
Well, I'm sorry, we had a sidebar. The transfer this last budget year, I recall, was about $2.7 million from the electric department. So taxes also goes to cover the general fund, and those were 2.3 million. I'm looking at June, she's kind of nodding her head. So, yeah, the lion's share, and as council will recall, water and sewer, we transferred very little. We transferred nothing from the water fund. We did transfer some money from the sewer fund. It was very small. I believe it was $30,400 sticks in my mind. But so it's very small. I would say, all in all, electric does about 60% of our general fund expenses off the top of my head.
Awesome, thank you.
Councilman McCoy?
One more comment I do want to make that was discussed at the board meetings, and I'm not going to do so very well, so I may look for city manager's help on this. But part of the thought process moving forward is we do have some large projects coming up for the city moving forward, and we want to remain in contention for that principal forgiveness on those larger dollar items. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, but that discussion should be had during the water and sewer rate discussion, because the principal forgiveness would be for those loans for the water and sewer. But you do recall correctly that we did discuss that.
Yep. Other questions from council?
Just one more.
Councilman King?
And if this passes tonight, when will it take effect?
So my recommendation would be to do it as soon as possible on the electric side, because even though we have enjoyed decreases in power supply costs for a decade, essentially, those tides are quickly shifting, and so the DMAC board typically doesn't produce what the 22 rate would be until the second week of December. So I don't know what it's going to be, but odds are it's going to be an additional increase as well for power supply costs only. And like I said, that money is not retained by the city. It goes directly to DMEC to cover the wholesale cost. And so, I mean, it shouldn't be large in terms of percentage-wise, because when we last captured it, it was about $88,000 or so was what the reduction was going to be. So I wouldn't think it'd be more than 100,000 or so. So it's not going to be it's not going to be near the 3 or 6% increase range. It shouldn't be.
Right. Well, I guess the only thing that concerns me is I agree there needs to be some type of adjustment. But timing, right? So you got Christmas, you got people on fixed income, and we're talking about potentially rolling out a hike increase next month, right? December billing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the motion that's been prepared is December 1, 2021, Councilman.
All right.
Other questions from council? Councilman Santos?
Yes. Sorry. I was thinking about what he was saying, and I lost my... actually, no, it came back. I was wondering if someone could refresh my mind as to what we were considering raising the rate last time. Was it 5%, or when we asked to get this study done?
At the budget meeting?
It was, I guess, a few months ago. It was...
During the budget hearing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My recollection, there was no electric rate increase proposed by the consultant nor the city. I think you're recalling there was, we did evaluate water and sewer rate increases
Okay.
during the budget hearings. We chose not to do either of those.
And
Council
what was the, what were we considering?
It was going to total out to about $19.20 a year, I think, is what I remember.
Yeah, we ran several scenarios for the council, so I can't tell you exactly which one. I think we ran three options for the city for the council to review.
Okay. Basically, the reason I was asking that is I wanted to see if the study that came back was lower or how much bigger the rate was.
For the water and sewer?
The water and sewer, yes. And
so Mr. Sims will do his water sewer presentation once council's finished with asking any questions they have related to electric.
okay.
Any other questions on electric? Would you like to hear the full report, or do you want to vote on the electric first? Hear the full report? Okay. If you'll
Yeah.
continue.
Okay. So the report to the Operations Committee essentially follows the same form and format of the electric report. And so you can see on page 2, that's the breakout of what the water and wastewater increases in just payroll are for the 2022 fiscal year. So it's about $117,000 total between the two of them. So, and this is the next page 3. So this is for there needs to be within a 3 to 5 year time window a significant upgrade done to the wastewater treatment facility. And the bonding, the financing for that, the primary source of that funding, if they see that the average cost of the water and sewer utilities combined for the year is less than 2% of the median household income for that utility, that rather than being eligible to receive debt forgiveness on some of the partial principal debt forgiveness, they would require an increase in, they say that essentially your rates are too affordable at that point, and that you would need to make an increase in your rates rather than receive principal debt forgiveness. And so line 1 shows the median household income for 2019, the most recent year we could get off of the census website for Seaford is $48,438. And so on line 3, that shows a combined bill, if it was at 2%, is essentially $80.73 a month. The city's current total combined bill for water and sewer is only $67.60. So we're at 1.67% of the median household income for the city currently. Typically, the sewer bills are about twice as expensive as the water bills. So if we were to further break down where that 2% threshold is received from, about about 1/3 of it would need to come from the water bills, and the 2/3 would need to come from the sewer bills. So the total increase for today, if we were to get to that 2% threshold, would be a $13.13 increase per month per bill, essentially. And that's almost a 20% increase to customers. So the page 4 shows us the operating expenses for just the water department. And rather than going back to 2011, I only go back to 2018 for both the water and the sewer, because that was the last rate increase for those utilities. So going under the same assumption that at that time when those rates were set, they were to perfectly collect the operating expenses, we can see how they've progressed essentially since 2018. And so on the water side, going from $976,000 in 2018 up to $991,000 in 21, and then up to almost 1.2 once we factor in the additional payroll cost for the budget year 2022. So that's an increase of almost $225,000. And similarly, we can offset that by any increase in revenues. And there's about $140,000 increase in revenues from additional sales, 2018 relative to now. So really the net increase then necessary for the water department is only the $84,000. And that $84,000 on the next page essentially translates to this option 1, where if we were to simulate the same 3 options, 1 would be if we do only the payroll increase for this current fiscal year, that's about an 8.5% increase to customers, that $100,000. If we were to collect the full payroll increase since 2018, that's almost $170,000. That's 14% increase roughly to customers. And then to do the full increase, it would be 18% increase to customers. Now, of course, those percentages are high from the standpoint of our rates are so low that any incremental changes are going to look pretty big on the percentage basis, but in terms of dollar amount increases, that's what's on line 13. So option 1 is just a $1.90 increase per month. Option 2 is a $3 increase per month, and option 4 would be a $4 increase per month for just the water, to essentially 100% collect for the increase in operating expenses since 2018, when the rates were last set. And so the page 6 shows graphically where the city of Seaford's rates are on a per 1,000 gallon usage basis. And this is for a metered customer. Now, the city is diligently working on converting all of the commercial customers to be metered, because those are the largest customers. But unfortunately, the residential side, it's going to be a couple more years before we can get to the residents and essentially change their meters out to be measured. So for all intents and purposes, if this was a residential customer, the Seaford line is the dotted one, it would be a straight flat line. There's no difference in fee regardless of the size of the property. You know, if it's a single family home, it's the same $22 a month, essentially. Well, really what this is showing is that relative to our nearest neighbors, we really got sort of the opposite effect on the water side that we had on the electric side. On the electric side, we were collecting everything on the variable side, where the more kilowatt hours you consumed, the more you were paying essentially to the fund overall. Where here, it's the larger use customers, i.e. a residential customer that's not metered, that has, you know, a very large home or pool or sprinklers out in their yard, it's $20 for everybody regardless. So they're not paying their fair share, so we need to work towards an increase in the incremental rate, the next per 1,000 gallon rate, and we need to work towards essentially as quickly as possible continuing to meter as many people as possible. There are other ways around it, but I think the fact that some of these increases, at least on a percentage basis, are sort of too large at this point to consider trying to adjust the rates any other way than doing an across-the-board increase, which is what I had initially discussed on the electric side, where it should really just be a percentage increase to every one of the rates. Even though there is several rate blocks for the water side, the first rate block is the first 666,000 gallons, which is almost every customer total. There are a very handful of months where some customers would use more than that and would fall into the lower priced next 1,000 gallons up to about $1.5 million. Nobody goes above that. So for all intents and purposes, there's really no rate block structure, so it would just be increasing the rates by a fixed percentage. It's going to take a long process, but it likely needs to work towards it the way we did on the electric side, where we introduce a customer charge as opposed to the minimum bill, and work on these issues going forward. But when you've got larger than 10% increases to customers on the table, typically the best thing to do is just to do it on a percentage basis. So the page 7 shows just how Seaford compares relative to other utilities when we're talking about the first 3,000 gallons, which is actually more conducive to a typical consumption for a customer. The city's is based off of a 9,000 gallon minimum bill, essentially. And we're well below everybody in that category. And then our next 1,000 gallons, we're only charging $2.51, where the next closest ones are almost $1 more. So that's what I'm saying. We need to tilt our rates where the lower usage customers would pay less and the higher usage customers would pay more. And it's just supported by nearly every other utility in the area. And so for the next couple pages that are following, mirror images except for the sewer department. And there's more disparate increases in costs on the water and sewer, on the sewer side, going from 1.45 million in 2018 up to almost 2.1. And so that's the increase of the $640,000. So it's pretty significant on the sewer side, degradation over the last couple of years. And so what that would look like in those three option scenarios, again, the first option, collecting just the 2022 increases in payroll, it's only $14,000 to collect. The total amount of the payroll increase since 2018 is about $260,000. That's about 11%. And the full increase in operating expenses is almost a 30% increase. And so the discussion circled around really the middle option again, the option 2 for both the water and sewer, and really focusing on the increase per month being $5. The thought was that would be palatable or reasonable for customers to be able to assume on the sewer side, and it's only a $3 increase on the water side. So the total is about $8 a month for water and sewer under that option, and it's about a 12% increase to customers on average. And the sewer side, again, the next page shows what the rates are relative to the surrounding utilities, and you can see Seaford's dotted line, with the exception of the straight line is the Blades and Bridgeville. They have county sewer, and those are not intended for commercial customers. It's only for small bedroom communities, so they don't typically even measure theirs. It's just a fixed amount per month for those customers, which is why it appears in that fashion. But still, the same thing is occurring on the sewer side. We're just well below everybody in the area on a per unit rate and monthly overall rate. And the last few pages just shows the combination of the two together, the water and sewer together, under each option. And so if we did go with that middle option 2, that brings us up to a 1.88% of the median household income for the year. So it's still not quite the 2%, but again, would get us significantly closer to get that principal debt forgiveness.
Okay. Councilman King, was there any comments from the Operations Committee?
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Did you want to add anything from the Operations Committee on the water and sewer side?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Sims in regards to the water and sewer? Councilman Henderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that in-depth presentation. I was present at the Joint Operations and Electric Committee meeting, and it was a lot of information to digest. I appreciate how it's been laid out here. Although it's a lot, it is as concise as you can make it. So I do appreciate that. My main question is, and it might be directed to the city management and the rest of the council as well, is and I heard you talk about your reticence to get to the over 2%, that you wanted to go gradually, but we're fast coming up on major capital improvement, wastewater improvement that at this time will cost about $9 million. And we recently, because it was determined by the state revolving fund that our rates were affordable, that we lost an opportunity for a loan with principal forgiveness to run a water line? Or
Sewer line, yes, sir.
Sewer line north on Route 13. Fortunately, we had money, ARPA money, and some other money that was available to help pay for that. Otherwise, we would have had to pay for the full amount, and we wouldn't have gotten that 50% for forgiveness of principal. So I think it's important that we, as assertively as possible, get to that 2% and possibly a little bit more, because as median incomes rise, that percentage will be lower. So we need to track that very carefully. So just by my quick calculation, you know, on a $9 million project, that's going to cost us at 4%, $360,000 a year in interest, just in interest, not in total debt service. So if we were able to cut that in half, we would be down to $180,000 a year in interest, which is just slightly above the rate increase, right?
That's right.
But we lose that opportunity if we don't get our rates in line, because although the customers will balk at paying a few with $5 a month more in rates, if we have to borrow money and have a debt service of $810,000 a year, then they will be upset, because that money's going to have to come from somewhere, whether it's sewer or other taxes or something, to pay for this crucial upgrade. Not only crucial, it's going to be mandated. We have to do it. We don't have any choice. So the crux of my question is, will we, and it's a rhetorical question, doesn't need an answer, but my recommendation is that we should, after March 1st, 2022, be investigating how we get that to that next level, so that we don't lose that opportunity of getting $4.5 million of money returned to us, to the city, to the residents. It's their money. It's not the city's money. It's the residents' money. Mm-hmm. So that's my prescient concern, that we don't lose sight of raising $5 rate and then have to raise rates $15 in order to pay for this project. So I appreciate that you want to move slowly, but I admonish you, when we hire you again to do another rate study, to really drill down and get to that 2% or just above it with a safety factor, so that we don't lose those opportunities.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Sims?
Well, I had a question, but I just wanted to make sure that I understood this correctly. Councilman Henderson, you're thinking that we should go with the option 3 because that's at 2.09%, or were you thinking that we should go with the 1.88 and try to work to that towards the 2% in February?
No, I'm unlike last year when I made a recommendation to change the recommendations of the committee. I'm going to take the recommendation of the committee on motion B.
Okay.
I'm not inclined to change their recommendation this year.
just making a statement. We need to work quickly towards that.
We definitely really need to do that because we have a looming mandated upgrade, and we don't want to lose out on opportunity to cut the price of that thing in half.
Yeah, as far as the electric portion, I am leaning with the recommendation from the committee as far as option B. But with this one, if we're trying to get the to the 2%, and we do have an option here of 2.09, which is exactly what I think it's exactly what you were suggesting. Have it a little bit over because the wages could be increasing, and so I think that with as far as the water and sewer goes, we should try to go to the 2% as fast as we can. And as far as the electric goes, I'm not recommending option 3 in that one. I'm in line with the recommendation that we received from the committee. That's my thoughts.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Sims?
I have one.
Councilman
All
King?
right, Mr. Sims, can we talk a little bit about 2018 when we made that adjustment in the water and sewer? Can we look at the revenues that we were generating in 2018 versus the 2000 or 2020 revenues that the water and sewer department generated? Can you talk about those numbers, the difference in those numbers?
Yeah, and that's what's on the bottom of their respective pages there. On page 4 would be line 11. Those are the retail revenues. Yeah, I mean, there's not as much fluctuation year to year as you would see on the electric side. So their revenues have increased roughly $140,000 or so over that 4-year period. But there's much less weather sensitivity, and really from a commercial side too, it's much more uncommon to have a high water consumption customer relative to a high electric consumption customer. If you're talking about the Amazon distribution center and things of that nature, it's just proportionally the revenues are much more stable year over year for water and sewer.
Sure. I'm alluding more to the fact that we're processing, right? So we're processing water from Blades, Bridgeville. And so that process of us treating that, the profitability aspect of that is growing tremendously. So not more of a residential aspect, but more as a total department. And maybe Charles, you can allude to what those numbers look like, general fund numbers. But I know since 2018 until now, that department has grown tremendous as far as total revenue because of all the other things that department's doing for other cities.
Yeah, now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sims. Your analysis here is budget reports that you've received from us.
That's
so
correct.
All of our O&M expenses, revenues are included in this analysis.
That's right.
Okay, so thank you. So those revenues that we've seen or anticipate to see are baked into these numbers. Blades, the sewer district that we have with the county, as far as Blades goes, there's a couple things to think about there. It's a very small sewer district, so it's about 100,000 gallons a day of our total 1.4, 1.5 million gallons a day. So it's not a large number. And our arrangement with the county is that's an O&M cost with a small 5% surcharge for the handling and management that we do. So we don't really return a lot of profit. That's dollars that come through, but they basically pay for treatment and operation. They're partners with us in the plant. And in return for that, they also provide us money during the expansion that Councilman Henderson referenced. They pay for that piece of the plant. That agreement was expanded with the Unified Sewer District recently. A couple things there. So again, we get a small management fee off that. Our dollars go up, but really we just make the little bit of revenue off of the management fee. Additionally, too, what's not baked into these numbers is, there's a lag in budget. So when we treat these gallons that we receive, it started a little bit slowly, We only received half in the last budget year. We're up now to the full discharge that we anticipate from them. So all those dollars aren't really baked into these numbers yet. They will be over the next budget or two, if that answers your
It does.
question.
Yep, yep, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilman McCoy?
If I can circle back to electric for a second. Ideally, I'd like to have the city leadership and the council all on the same page from where we're going in these directions here. The one addendum that in my mind I'm thinking about is what Councilman King brought up about the execution date on December 1. If we were to alter that to January 1, is that allowable, or is that going to, because permissible underneath this situation?
Yes, sir. I mean, that date, we established that based on the consultant's recommendation to do it sooner rather than later. And I'll circle back to what Mr. Sims said. He anticipates a wholesale rate increase to occur in the January timeframe.
Right.
So I think, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Sims, but I think his thought process was, you don't want to do this, you don't want to have a compounded increase.
That's right.
Do one, and then you'll have the second one, you'll be able to look at that. So I think that's what drove his recommendation sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and particularly because the DMEC rate is, that one's unavoidable. Our hands are really tied. The number is what DMEC says it is, unfortunately, and that's.
I'm sorry, sir, and I think I'm correct in this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sims. Council made the pay rate changes out of budget cycle. So, this issue is getting larger and larger the longer we wait to recover those expenses. Is that
That's
is that
right.
an appropriate way to say that?
Yes. Yeah.
So the longer we wait, the longer that deficit will get.
Sure, makes sense. Okay. Other quick, Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if the rate is effective December 1st, meter reading will occur when?
June's going to help me out here. It is for consumption in November, billed in December.
Okay, so it's backward looking,
Yes, sir.
so it's not really effective on the 1st. It's going to be enacted on the
Yeah.
1st.
You are correct.
But it will be billed out at that time, and then the bill will be due by the 5th of January.
You are correct.
Good point. Yep. Other questions? Councilman King?
Thank you, sir. So if I understood you correctly, the adjustment now, payroll adjustments increase, and you anticipate another increase in rates in January?
For the PCAC is likely to increase out of necessity on January 1.
And do you have, can you, is it too early to kind of talk about that? Like, what is your vision or thought around what that looks like?
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. So the DMEC provided a 5-year forecast back in 2017. It has been relatively accurate. It's not set in stone. I mean, there's obviously a lot of projects like the Beasley Station and some of the AMP Ohio solar projects where they procure power supply costs ahead of time, so they have a generally good idea of what it's going to be. That increase is less than $1 on paper at that time. Like I said, I don't expect it to be significant. It could surprise us, but I doubt it. So I think it might go up to 72.50, something like that, and it's at 71.49.
So it's your recommendation, instead of waiting to see what that is, making one adjustment to make two adjustments?
So yeah, and the reason for that is the justifications for each. This rate increase is necessary to fund all of the utilities and the general fund to some degree in the current fiscal year. It's pretty necessary from that standpoint without a significant reduction in the transfer to the general fund. And then the PCAC fluctuation, then if that's another % or something of that nature, that would essentially just be a fallout, and it's not necessarily putting the blame on DMEC, but the justification is that our hands are tied in that nature. It just essentially has to be done by code, you know.
Okay. Thank you.
Makes sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so what we'd like to do tonight is we're going to break this out into two different motions, one for electric and then one for water and sewer. So we'll take on the first one, and I'll accept the motion on the electric.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to implement the retail, to implement the retail rates consistent with option number 2, that will increase the overall electric rates by an average of 2.95% for all customers effective December 1, 2021. The residential and commercial non-demand rate increases will also incorporate a $5 per month increase in their customer charges applied on a revenue-neutral basis as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Do we have a second?
Councilman Holland, Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
Okay, are there any questions on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
And Councilman King?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. All right, next we have the water and sewer rates, and I'll accept a motion on that.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to increase water rates by $3.13 per month and sewer rates by $5.18 per month for a combined impact of 12.3%. The implementation of these rates is to be delayed until March 1 of 2022 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman King. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Councilman McCoy seconds. All right, are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
And Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Mr. Sims, thank you. It's a lot of work.
Thank you.
We appreciate all that you've done.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Rest your feet.
For now.
Taking rate increases is never fun, but appreciate your guys' work on that. All right, next we're going to call up our chief to go over a live burn training.
Mayor, City Council, City Manager, thank you for inviting the fire department tonight to discuss the training option at 23407 Atlanta Road, which is a property that's owned by the Seaford Fire Department. We're in the process of demolition of the house at that location. We're in the process of, we have all the permits from DENREC, EPA for the burn going through right now. We have demolition permits in process right now for the end of January for full demolition. And we're also other stuff that's, the other thing we need is a permission from you to do a live burn training at that facility on November 27, 2021. This training is going to also be involved with a checklist from the National Fire Protection Association's 1403 on live fire training evolutions. There's a checklist that we're going to follow on here, which gives us safety reasons. We're also going to use our incident command system. We're going to invite our mutual aid partners, Blades, over to assist us for the day. We're going to use safety and accountability. We're going to have EMS on standby. The water supply is going to be done by tankers at first. If we have a problem and we need to get water, then we have hydrants nearby to assist with that. We're going to limit it to 1 or 2 rooms burning with trained instructors leading the sessions. As I said before, we have asbestos removal has already been done. We have the DENREC demolition permits, the demolition permit from the city. I'm trying to think of down around. Also, we're trying to do the burn thing because of the Natural Resources Clean Air Act. We have to have that on file before this goes forward. After we're done, we're going to make sure that the building is secured until demolition happens at the end of January. Like I said, the house is scheduled to be fully demoed by the end of January 2022. This is important for the fire department because it allows us to bring our volunteers close by in the city to provide valuable training of structural firefighting, which is probably 15 to 20% of what we do throughout our fire protection district. With this year, we get several requests a year to burn down houses for, removal processes. It's a lot of work. My assistant chiefs and deputy chief have worked really hard for the last few months trying to make sure they get all the paperwork together and all the safety rules together to go there. And now at the point that we asking for permission from the city because there is a ordinance about doing live burns within the city there. So as the chief of the fire department, we ask for permission. I don't have a 30-page report like Mr. Sims does. I don't. So,
Chief, how do we communicate to the neighbors to let them know what's going on?
I think that we are going to have to push it out social media, maybe on our site, maybe the police department site, the fire, and the city site that we're going to do it on November 27th. We're also looking at options through Councilman Henderson. I proposed this on October 25th at our liaison meeting with the vice mayor and the city manager to this point. Some of the options he brought up from some of the other councilmen, we would like to also maybe set up an area where we can bring in some people that might be interested in be part of the fire department, joining and seeing what the occupation or the volunteerism of our system is. They can ask questions about people there. Maybe even make it into an event where we can maybe live stream some of it so people can see what the fire department is doing, because it's not too often that we do this. One thing that I have to stress is that when we get into this, it is a very dangerous situation when we're dealing anytime with live firefighting training. That's why the safety procedures have to be followed by this guideline here to the best of our ability. That's why we're trying to make sure that stays in fact. But like I said, the pushing out I'm going to say social media has to probably be our best bet on that. We have a lot of followers on our site, such as the city and the police department. We put them dates out.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions for the chief? Councilman Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, public safety is paramount, of course, but we're also, we want to preserve the safety of our firefighters, our volunteers. Isn't it true that pamphlet 1403 was developed primarily because of an accident in Delaware that caused the fatality?
It's one of the incidents that it was created from, yes.
So
you got to remember that out of 100 firefighters that on average have died per year, very small numbers done by structural firefighting. If any, the last few years it's been very low. Training-wise, it could be anything from, heart attacks or cardiac related on scene or firefighting from there. There has been some significant catastrophic injuries and deaths from training fires in the past throughout the country, but I think with the technology and the safety of our equipment and the way we provide plans out there that I'm hoping that we can provide a much more safer atmosphere for firefighters to work within.
I just think it's important to note that strict adherence to that particular standard provides a safe environment for the firefighters.
Correct. Also, it gives the fire department an opportunity to operate in a structure other than a brick training facility, a fixed facility that are at our training facilities. Because when we respond to incidents within the city or with our fire protection district, our mutual aid responses, they're not brick buildings. They're wood frame structures, and us being able to recreate scenarios that are more viable to the firefighters, reactions when they get there instead of a fixed burn building. It gives us upper hand sometime with training.
Okay. Other questions for the chief? Yeah. Councilman Santos?
Hey, Chief. What's the closest property to that one?
Our shed behind it.
Okay.
The next place would be Crossgate. Is across the street, probably about, I'm going to say, probably about a couple 100 feet, 300 feet away from there. There's a house across there. Then you have Meadowwood across the street, which is probably 600 feet, 700 feet away from it. Okay. So there's a big field next to it, which is also owned by the fire department there, next to the Grace Church and the other churches. I forget the name of the other church, but Grace is next to it on the corner, and the Jehovah's Witness Church is behind it. But that's probably 1,000.
Okay, so they're pretty.
Yeah, we have no exposure problems. The only thing we're going to have some exposure problems we may have with is some of the trees, but we're not intending to burn this down. We're intending to burn a few rooms, recreate room and content fires, moving lines, some basic search and rescue training, and that's it. We're hoping that we're not going to burn the house down. That's not our intent.
Okay. And as far as about letting the people in the surrounding areas know. Maybe a lot of them might not be on social media. I know that I don't know. I go door knocking quite a bit when I'm as far as real estate goes, and what I do is I put door hangers that way. If I miss them, they.
I understand that I hope that we're going to be able to get some of the information out to around them, and that's a great idea, and we'll see where we can go from there.
Okay, that's it.
Okay. All right, if there's no other questions, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the request to the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department to perform live burn training at their property located at 23407 Atlanta Road and permit the city manager to issue a special permit as outlined in section 8.2.6 of the municipal code.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Henderson. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Councilman King seconds. Are there any questions to the motion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
It's unanimous, Chief. Good
I
luck.
appreciate it. I hope that if you guys are around November 27th, come on out for, you don't have to come out for a while, but come out and see what we do.
Absolutely.
Burgers?
We're going to have hot dogs and burgers, you know that. So, and when we get done, I'll have a 40-page report like Mr. Sims for you guys, all right?
Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you. All right, next we have bioenergy development and the city providing sewer service. We're calling up Mr. Hoffman. All right.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Scott Hoffman. I'm with Duffield Associates Consulting Engineers out of Dover, Delaware. And this evening I am representing Bioenergy DevCo. And we have several speakers that will be talking tonight. But before we get to our formal presentation, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of where we are and how we got to where we are tonight. So Bioenergy DevCo is constructing a anaerobic digestion facility at the former Purdue pelletizing plant. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is, but basically it converts organic waste material into energy in the form of natural gas and soil amendments. So over the past year and a half to 2 years, we've been working with the bioenergy team on design and permitting of the facility. Earlier this year, we passed a major milestone in the form of a Sussex County conditional site plan approval, and we are working now trying to obtain a DNREC comprehensive environmental and permitting package. The next step at that is going to be a public hearing, which we're working on getting to the point where we can have that hearing. One of the outstanding items is wastewater service. Unfortunately, the site is kind of in a no man's land for wastewater service. We've talked to Laurel, we've talked to Sussex County, and we've had several good discussions with Mr. Anderson and the town staff. And we feel at this point that Seaford represents our best option in terms of wastewater service. So that's the primary reason we're here to speak to you this evening. We also have been having some discussions with Sussex County in terms of infrastructure, a pumping station and force main that would transmit the wastewater from the site up to the city. And of course, before we have those discussions further with the engineer's office, they would like to know that we have a viable partner. So at this time, I'm going to introduce Peter Ettinger. He is the Chief Development Officer for Bioenergy, and we'll proceed with our formal presentation.
Thanks. Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Much appreciated to be here this evening. I should really say everything he said. That's why we're here. We'd love to have the opportunity to work with the city in the management of wastewater. We've been working with Mr. Anderson in discussing total volumes, how we can bring that material to meet Seaford County standards. And we've been working, as Scott has said, with Sussex County to enable a number of different opportunities moving forward. For those of you who don't know Bioenergy DevCo, we finance, build, operate anaerobic digesters. We've done this now for 25 years throughout the United States. Our first effort here in the United States is in Jessup, Maryland, and our second is at the old agro-recycle facility. And you would think, why the agro-recycle facility? I could say it couldn't be any more perfect. If I go back to Governor Carper's question of, do I have to make a decision about a healthy poultry industry or a healthy environment? His answer was, I choose both. For us, anaerobic digestion is just the way to go do that. We've shown that many, many times throughout the world. And we've done that by becoming part of a community, by being able to invest in a community. This is finances that we bring to an area. We're happy to cash anybody's check, but really what our goal and objective is to really support the community, support the businesses that are there, and be able to do so in a way that's environmentally savvy. For those of you who don't know what anaerobic digestion is a completely enclosed process. So it's if you think about a cow stomach on a utility scale, it's exactly what we do. All trucks that come into a facility, and you know the old recycle site, we're using that structure. We're not creating anything really new. Anything new would be behind it. It's not visible from the road. And we're also adapting the compost facility, which is frankly state-of-the-art and which is run by Jeff Dietz, who's our facility manager, who most of you probably know in one way, shape, or form. We're adapting both to really be able to manage materials that typically would have been land applied, such as DAF materials such as poultry waste that typically would have been land applied, and creating renewable natural gas and what's known as a soil amendment. So an anaerobic digester is a completely enclosed process. Nothing is, we use scrubbers and biogas treatment and bioscrubbers to maintain odor-free environments. Doors shut around each of our facility as they enter, and we actually are able to go and manage that process. Again, much like if you think about fermentation of beer, what we're doing is the gas goes to the top, cow creates gas, we capture the gas, a cow also creates manure, we create a healthy soil amendment from that, creating an opportunity out of what most people think of as waste. Both of these products have a market. Both of these products, we're very fortunate to be able to create energy in a variety of forms. It can be gas, it can be electricity, it can even be hydrogen. And we do see it as a showcase in terms of our ability to go and manage, not only produce material, which we do today, but we're working with Mount Air and with AMIC, with Allen Harim, and a variety of other smaller producers to make sure that we not only treat waste, but we create jobs. And we create an environment where today we hire about 11 people at the compost facility. By the time we're done, we'll be at about 50. And these range from $15 an hour jobs to $27.50 per hour to actual contract positions, not including the roughly $45 million we'll spend locally to go and build this project as well. The facility looks something like this, as you can tell. Sorry, I never know where to look on these things. That's the old Purdue facility, as you see in the front. I was actually talking with Randy Day not so long ago when we first came here, and he said, listen, we believe in sustainability. We think it is incredibly important. We created a fertilizer plant. We thought we'd be able to create pellets. We didn't know that chicken waste would actually be a commodity. We created a compost facility, frankly, a state-of-the-art facility that now is capable of and is permitted at 30,000 tons per year, and we sell out in that process. He said, but we don't really do sustainability well. We do chickens well. And so in working together, we created a vision for the industry overall, again, demonstrating a showcase, so to speak, here in Seaford. We'll take in 210,000 tons of material per year. It comes from the various facilities that you know and love at Mount Air and Allen Harim and others in this Delmarva Peninsula. We take that material, we create around 410,000 what's known as MMBTUs per year. That's probably equal to, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use a New York reference, probably 150 times the size of Central Park in terms of its carbon sequestration. It takes in roughly, that number is somewhere around 100,000 CO2 equivalent tons per year. That's something like 21,000 cars and 15,000 homes. We're targeting on 2022, Q3, Q4, to go do that, and we will continue to operate the compost facility because that digestate, once we cook the material at what's known in a mesothelic form, what comes out of it is digestate that is an integral part of our compost facility. So if we move to the next slide, that just gives you an aerial view of what it will look like. If you see the containers, the red in the back, those are our anaerobic digesters. You wouldn't be able to see those from the road. traditionally we'll keep everything looking exactly the same. It'll operate in its same manner. We'll take in roughly the same amount of trucks per day, per year as well. In our next slide, what we're working now, just the status of where we are. We have existing agreements to take in feedstock with Purdue and others. We have, as Scott has said, we're worked through Sussex County. We're in the process of now working with DENREC. We're planning on hearings in late December, early January. We're working on our final environmental permits as well. Our next step is really wastewater solutions, and we've been very fortunate, as I said, to work with Mr. Anderson and his staff in looking at total effluent amounts and how to treat that material in a way that could be accepted. I'll wrap up my part of it and then introduce you to our chief engineer, Christine McKiernan, to really talk about the water itself by simply saying DAF material and organic poultry waste contributions need to not be in landfills and they need to not be land applied. We can manage that. If you think of me, I don't really care about, I wouldn't take a position on whether I was a pro-chicken, anti-chicken, a CAFO person or a non-CAFO person. I'm the guy at the end of the parade who cleans up. That's what this is about. How do you manage waste? How do you turn waste into opportunity? We transform these organic feedstocks. We take them from what others consider waste and we create opportunity from them. A renewable natural gas with Chesapeake Utilities and others, which is in great demand, and particularly a healthy soil amendment. By the way, on the compost side, roughly 65% of our material goes off to Delmarva. But in this case, we think that we can actually meet and exceed demands for nutrient management as set forth by DENREC. Our marketable products, as we've said, are already in demand. We've sold more compost this year in 1 year of operation than Purdue did in 5 years. So it's a tremendous asset. You know, I looked at Jeff and his crew and say it's a miracle how you've been able to do this, how you've created a thriving business and a growing business. And that's why we take micronutrients off the Delmarva. And then our goal is really to create a showcase. We're working with Tech. We've been working with the high schools. We've done a number of different community events from Trunk and Treat a week or so ago to make sure that this facility is an environmental and an economic success. And the only way we do that is by working with the community, by working here, by being able to figure mutual ways to go and benefit us collectively over the long term. So I'll introduce Christine. She's really the smart person here. She knows everything about wastewater construction. I'm the one who gets to introduce all these smart people. So, and I'm kind of a human border collie, so I just try to make sure we do the right thing at the right time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know how to follow that up. Good evening.
Good evening.
So just a step back, you know, we're talking about wastewater. That was, you know, our sort of main focus for you folks. And the materials are in the digester. They're in there for about 35 days. They're in there at about 105, 110 F, and it's all bacterial, right? So bacteria are breaking down these components. It leaves the digesters, and then we go through the process of creating a stream that eventually would be something as a wastewater delivery to Seaford. So in that initial process of bringing those materials in, and as we work our way to coaxing the system up, because again, it is alive, it's bacteria, it's not just, hey, let's dump it and go. We have to coax them along and make them happy on chewing the stuff. Initially, maybe about 30,000, we have 29,000 on there, that's very precise. It's really about 35,000, maybe 40, which will ratchet its way down as we tweak this along. This happens on a 24-hour, 7 days a week, otherwise you'd kill the bacteria, so it's alive all the time, and that's constant. I'm going to skip the bits about the pump station. I'm going to leave that to Mr. Hoffman, and we're going to go on to the next slide. That's a lot of boxes. It's a little bit of what I was just describing about stuff coming out of digester tanks and going into what eventually would be this wastewater treatment plant that we'll have on site. That will prepare the material, clean it, and meet a specification that allows us to go to Seaford. But essentially it consists of saying, I've come out of the digesters, I want to concentrate as much of the solid material as possible because I'm going to send it to the compost process. I'm going to take the leftover liquid, I'm going to reduce the nitrogen content, the phosphorus content, I'm going to control metals content. Ultimately the goal is to say, I've produced a stream of water that is if I wasn't disinfecting it to a certain level, I'd probably be able to drink it. And no, I won't do that, and I'm not going to demonstrate that. But that's essentially the level of treatment that will be installed to be able to do this. That's ultimately so that we can, go to the next slide, meet Seaford's requirements. That's really the whole goal. So it's quite extensive treatment, which you might not normally see in a plant like this, but because we want to meet those limits, those are the steps and the sequence that is required. There is nothing else to say about it. We're meeting that. That's quite as simple as I can get. I'm going to leave it to Mr. Hoffman to go on to the next bit.
Okay, so we now have our treated wastewater, and we need to get it to Seaford. We are working, as I said, we'll be working with the county to basically create another sewer district, another Sussex County sewer district, which would include only the pumping station and force main, which we'll show on the next slide, but essentially that would connect to the city. But we are concerned that before that is constructed, that's a fairly complex project, we will have wastewater and a need to be doing something with it. So the discussions that we've had with Mr. Anderson and the town staff is that we would basically pump and haul and discharge to, I think the area that we discussed was up a manhole in the industrial park. I don't know the exact location, but generally speaking. So looking at the pumping station and force main alignment, when we get the county on board, we're talking about a pumping station that would be on the Bioenergy DevCo site. We haven't finalized this alignment, but we've looked at basically constructing a force main approximately 14,500 feet up 2 blades. We would not be connecting to the blade sewer system directly, because the county has some reserve capacity there, and essentially this project would use it up, so that's not really desired at this time. What we talked about is crossing the river and connecting to the town system on the west side of the treatment plant, and basically going directly or pretty much directly into the city's headworks at the treatment plant to avoid impacts on the sewer system, the gravity mains that are some of the older mains in town.
Sorry to interrupt. Would this line be strictly for you, or would the county eventually allow others to tap on it?
So at this point, we've only had discussions that this would be strictly for Bioenergy DevCo. It would be great if some other users could connect to this thing, but discussions haven't advanced far enough to be able to say that that's definitely happening. So can we go to the next slide, please? So this is our timeline. So we're not the only engineer that's involved. We're like, I'm here representing pretty much the wastewater part of this project. But the full engineering is supposed to be completed by March 2022 in terms of the digester project. As stated, they were trying to start up third or fourth quarter next year. We'd like to get the pumping station and force main construction going sometime next year, so that this pump and haul process is not something that's going to go on for a long time. But those dates are still kind of up in the air. They will be starting up again in third or fourth quarter next year. And I believe, Christine, that the two flow rates, the 30 and the 60, represent your initial operations and then your full build-out operations in terms of gallons per day. Okay, next slide, please. So what we're here tonight is to show the council what this project is about, provide an opportunity for you all to ask questions. And then I think what we're looking for at this point is to begin the process of talking about an agreement with the city for wastewater treatment and disposal. And then we also need to begin some serious discussions with the county on the sewer district, so we're looking for your support on that. Burley Mears has provided us with a capacity letter with the caveat that an agreement is needed to basically to be able to fulfill that capacity. So that concludes our presentation, and we're glad to answer any questions that y'all may have.
Okay, questions from City Council? Councilman McCoy?
Few rapid fire questions. You mentioned in passing the facility in Jessup. How long has that been up and running?
It's in the middle of construction. It'll be commissioned in February of this year. So that's our first, next year, sorry. February one. I'd be working backwards. So it'll be in February of 2022. We do have 240 plus other facilities throughout Europe that we would not only invite you to, but be happy to, have you come and tour, including coming down to Jessup, which serves a different kind of pizza, but a pretty good one.
Those other facilities that you have, the 240, I'm sure many of them have similar parameters that you have to meet when it comes to effluent. Do you ever have any issues meeting or exceeding those standards?
Not at all.
Can I invite you up to the mic? I'm sorry, that way you know it's, I'm sorry we have to ask, but that way
No,
it's.
I'm sorry. I sit in a room and I think I'm big enough to do this. No, we've not. I mean, EU standards are actually much more stringent typically than United States standards. So, no, we've never had a violation. We don't intend to have a violation. Everything we do is very much open book. We file reports quarterly, if not monthly and quarterly with DENREC, and we would, certainly be, as we're working with Mr. Anderson, certainly be providing those same kind of documentation with you all as well.
Okay. Councilman King?
Yeah, thank you. We talk a little bit about the treatment of the waste, right? So we're trucking it in from your facility.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you, hey, we're committed to meeting Seaford's expectations on what that looks like. So how is that held measurable if you're dumping that into a grate in the wastewater treatment facility? Like, how do we measure that, saying, hey, your commitment of meeting these regulations, right? How do we know you're meeting those? How do we test that? How is that measurable?
We haven't finalized our agreement yet, but I would suggest we have a regular testing schedule. It'd either be daily per load, it can be monthly per load, it can be weekly per load. You can actually be part of the wastewater treatment facility and see it coming out of that area and monitor our activities. We'd be happy to do that. But it is typically, much like material coming to us, poultry material coming to us, they're held by a certain standard. We test that material, though, before it goes to a digester.
Sure.
And I would suggest you would do the same thing here.
Right, because eventually it goes into the Nanticoke River, right? Eventually?
Right.
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So we discharge-
Sorry, I'm
So
sorry.
we discharge right
My
now.
rivers are
Right.
completely
So we
confused.
discharge we discharge into the Nanticoke. So I guess my concern would
Yeah.
be, is that measurable, right? Saying, hey, we hear you, this is the target, this is the expectation. If you're treating it on your end and then dumping it into a grate, and that flows out, my concern, a little bit of a gray area, is how do we know that you're meeting those requirements?
Again, we would insist and encourage you to be part of our testing process and/or put a secondary testing process on part of that as well.
Do you have that already in place at
Oh,
all
yeah.
your other facilities?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We test everything. And you would be part of, I would invite you as part of the agreement to be part of to work with Jeff, for example, and who's been part of your facility over the course
Sure.
of time. Jeffrey's going to be managing a great deal of our facility, so he understands the requirements here in the Seaford facility and would make sure and ensure that we're doing that. You can never afford to, it's test, and test again. I'm the Holiday Inn School of Business, no surprises.
Well, I think she alluded to how stringent our expectations were, so that kind of left me a little leery, saying, hey, the city of Seaford is good, right?
Oh, it's a
for
good
us and
thing.
our residents, but it kind of seemed like, hey, we typically don't do this.
She would, oh, no, not, and although, as she also said that if we weren't disinfecting it, she'd drink it. So, I think we're okay. But no, I agree. I think that's a very smart move on everyone's part, is to make sure we're there.
Let me invite Director Mears up, and he can explain how we've done this for other customers, and we test regularly to make sure that what they say they're giving us is what they do. We've done this regularly in the past, so he could explain how we might do this.
Yeah, so that would become part of our industrial pretreatment program. just like any other user in town that's on our system, like Orient Chemical or BASF in the past. So we would provide them, we would have an agreement, and they'd be part of the program. They would have daily monitoring requirements. It'd be all spelled out in the permit, which we have not gotten that far yet. And then they would be required to give us monthly reports, and we would check it that way. So, but yeah, we would be on top of it for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Director Mears. Appreciate it.
Thank you, bro.
Other questions from Councilman Henderson?
Burley, could I ask you one question? There's 17 parameters. Are they the only ones, or are there others?
Those are probably the only ones that we specifically told them up front, but there could be more.
Are there?
Yeah, those. I think a lot of those were part of our local limits, and then some typical ones that are in there.
Right. So, if I understand the chart right, they are going to exceed. Their influent will exceed the standards of our effluent.
Their influence.
It says BIC, influent digestate, and wastewater treatment plant effluent. So the city of Seaford published limits. These numbers are what you test to for your discharge.
That is what we told them they needed to be to, yes.
Okay, so it's not how we measure our discharge.
Correct.
We have a
those are
much
headworks, like headworks limits. That's where they
Okay,
need to be
okay.
coming into our
All
headworks.
right. So I was a little bit confused about the terminology there. So it's obvious that our influent is not drinking water.
No.
Or,
I would not say what she said.
so my next question, and I think I know your answer, but we're talking at the end of when they're at full capacity, it being 60,000 gallons a day, and we're very sensitive about infiltration, about clean rainwater getting into the system, and how hard it is for our system to treat rainwater. So if we're receiving clear water waste that's borderline drinkable, does that affect our ability to treat it?
No.
Treat the system in general, not their waste, but waste in general.
So what we're asking them to do is get it down to a domestic level of sewage. So the same that's coming out of your house or a commercial establishment or anything like that. So it's at that level. So at that point, when it comes into the treatment plant, that's when the process starts. So we need some of those parameters to even make our operation work as far as BOD and things like that. So, and then we have an efficiency, removal efficiency throughout the plant, and we get down to our limits in our permit. So,
because I would argue that on a Saturday, that your phosphorus is higher. I mean,
could be
on a
concentrated.
daily basis, you're going to have a peak because everybody's washing clothes, right?
It could be, yeah.
But this is just like an average.
Yeah, it's our headworks. This is where we want to be coming into the plant. It's the design parameters is what a lot of work.
I just wanted to be clear that these numbers that Seaford's published limits are not effluent
No,
numbers.
not at all.
Okay.
Right.
Because
Okay.
it says effluent over on the left-hand side.
Yeah, I didn't create this
Yeah.
slide, so.
Oh, wastewater poke in there. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Councilman Santos.
Is this property leased or owned? The property that you guys are, yeah, is this property owned?
Yes,
It is, okay.
we own the property. We bought it in, I believe it was February 2019.
2019, cool. And the other question is just more for informational purposes. What genus and species of bacteria is used on this at this facility?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
I was wondering what genus and species of bacteria is used.
In the digest?
Christine.
So there
Okay.
Mine, everybody in this room, cow, chicken, pick one.
Okay.
Older than dirt,
Okay.
completely natural.
Okay, so this is a gram-positive bacteria. If this bacteria was to, is there any danger at all for if this bacteria was to get out and anybody gets infected? It goes.
They need air. They need to be in a zero oxygen environment. So if they are exposed to oxygen, they don't live very long.
Okay.
So there's really, you'd have to drink it basically, have some kind of damage, I guess.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions from council? I'll accept the motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Councilman King, to permit staff to evaluate Bioenergy Development Corporation BDC request for the city applied sewer service treatment provisions to accommodate for in Bowe former pelletizing plant located to include the cost charged BDC treatment agreement disposal between the city and BDC force main connection location cost share provisions for factor upgrades and other details of the proposal as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I have a question on the motion.
Yes, sir.
Should this motion pass, what would be the timeline for this investigation and going forward? What happens? Because this agreement is going to come back to council for execution and for the mayor's execution?
Yeah, several things will happen, Councilman. I appreciate you asking that question. Mr. Mears and his staff will work with EnviroWay and their staff to prepare the agreement. We have some standardized agreements, but we'll also have to work with them as far as, and their engineering staff and our city engineering staff for connection locations, things of that nature that are laid out here. But we'll also have to bring back to council a rate that we'll charge for this to put into our budget. Largely, I believe they will drive the timeline. What we have to do, our evaluation, preparation of documentation, I don't think will take all that long because we do have agreements that we will use as a guide. But it'll still take time to get it in front of council, so you'll see follow-up from this. Did I appropriately answer that question?
Exactly right. I mean, our goal and objective would be to begin immediately knowing that we have Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, because we'd like to, when we go to the hearing somewhere in January or February at DENREC, be able to say that we're now working with Seaford and that we're coming to an agreement. That would really be our time frame.
And they really need to see the details of the agreement and the cost, because that could factor into their decision-making here.
But this is a first step. They got to take this step first.
Yeah, in internal discussions with the Director of Public Works, we wanted to make sure City Council was agreeable to move this direction before we started to expend additional staff time, city engineer time. So it is step one of multiple steps.
Does that answer your question, Councilman Henderson?
It does, and I'm prepared to second if there are no other questions.
Okay, very good. We have a second. Are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
And Councilman Santos?
Aye.
It's passed. We're looking forward to working with you
Thank
in the
you,
county or whomever we need to do to help you out any way we
I
can.
got to say that thank you very much, and we very much look forward to the opportunity moving
Thank you.
forward. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. All right. Next, we're going to call Ms. June Merritt up, Director of Finance, to walk us through flex time.
Did you say flex time?
Strong.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
All right, you have in front of you in your packets a policy for its flex time off for exempt employees. An exempt employee under the Fair Labor Standards Act is an employee that's not eligible for overtime. They're paid at a rate for amount of work for the week. And so this policy basically is to standardize and provide guidelines for the usage of flex time for those exempt employees. For the city of Seaford, exempt employees are management employees, supervisors, directors, and city manager. So basically, it's implicit in the nature of the position, that you work however many hours that is needed to get the job done. That could be 40 hours, it could be 50, it could be 60. It just depends on the nature of the job at the time and what's required. So with that in mind, the policy is to assist those exempt employees in work-life balance options, so that if they are working over the 40-hour work week, that they have flexibility in their schedule to be able to either take off to attend to maybe family or, whatever life needs. So this policy basically lays out different guidelines. So flex time for exempt employees would only be accumulated on an hour-for-hour basis. So that's different for hourly employees, which are non-exempt employees. They earn comp time on a hour and a half basis, basically. So if they work an hour of overtime, if they choose not to get paid overtime and they want to take time off, they get an hour and a half off for that hour. Whereas, and that's because of Fair Labor Standards Act rules also. So since we are not eligible for overtime, we're accumulating it or asking to accumulate it on an hour-for-hour basis. The accrual of hours, we're setting it 100 hours. That's the same as the comp time policy. So we just wanted to make it easier to have the same amount between both policies. Also, these flex time hours will not be carried over from year to year. So any unused hours would expire on June 30th of every year. The other thing to keep in mind is that these hours are not going to be paid out. So even if we have time accumulated, if someone didn't use all of their time, it just basically goes away and it starts back up the next fiscal year. Also, under no circumstances would someone that retired or separated from employment, they would not get paid out these hours. And the rest of it's really just administrative as far as timekeeping records, how we recorded on the time card, how we would fill out leave forms and turn those things in. So if anybody has questions.
All right, are there any questions for Mrs. Merritt on the flex time policy? Councilman Henderson.
How many exempt employees do we have?
There are 8 or 9 of us.
We counted 9.
Yeah.
Is it, I know it must personally affect you because it's audit time and I see your vehicle here well into the night. So
it does.
I'm sure it has an impact on your life as well as the other 7.
Yes.
And I think it's fair.
I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve the flex time policy for exempt employees as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Santos. Is there a second?
Councilman Henderson, I second.
Councilman Henderson, second. Are there any questions on the motion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Santos.
Aye.
Councilman Henderson.
Aye.
Councilman Holland.
Aye.
Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Councilman King.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Jim. All right, do we have any old business?
No, sir, we do not.
Reminder of meetings.
We have 2 events, the annual Caroling in the Park event in Gateway Park, Monday, November 29th at 7 p.m., and then November 11th at 11 o'clock at Kiwanis Park. It is the Veterans Day celebration, and if it rains, it'll be at the Seaford High School as usual.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. All right,
Yes,
we'll
sir.
do committee reports. We'll start off with Administration IT. Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as my report has been submitted in its entirety, the city staff met with members of the Seaford Elite football program to discuss issues that occurred at the sports complex during games and practices. There was a fight, and their season has ended for the year, and there is talk of them possibly being able to play again the following year, but certain they had to make certain corrections in the way that they're handling stuff. City staff also met with the owner of Lakeshore Motors regarding the project timeline and cost increases. They are they do need some more time. So they are going to be working on doing certain repairs here and there, but as far as what they came here and told the mayor and council, they need to extend the time frame a little bit. Let's see. As far as the IT report goes, they are still working on the command vehicle installations. They are experiencing issues with performance and desktops locking up for the slim client deployments. They are working on documentation and all the updates involving the virtual environment GPUs. As far as the administration, as far as the finance report goes, they are still working on the fiscal year 2021 audits. It's a hybrid between on-site and them having to scan documents over to them. All their business is routine.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Police and Fire, Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start off with a report from Chief Wilson from the Seaford Volunteer Fire Department. As far as fire calls go, there were 88 calls total for the month of October, for an average of 2.8 calls per day. There's been 17 calls so far this month, for an average of 2.1 calls per day. For EMS, there were 372 calls in the month of October, for an average of 12 calls per day in October. 73 calls so far for this month, and for an average of 9.1 calls per day for the month to date. That leaves us with a total number of calls for 2021 of 4,089 through the department, for an average of 13.1 calls per day. Of the significant calls, there was a call on 530 North Willie Street for carbon monoxide emergency. One adult and 3 children were transported due to high levels of carbon monoxide in the residence of over 800 parts per million. The house was ventilated, and notification was given to Chesapeake Utilities. Pardon me. Under apparatus, all apparatuses, pardon me. All apparatus is currently in service. The dive trailer is being sold to the Delaware State Police after approval. Thank you. After approval, approval's pending from their administration, and the dive equipment is being sold to Columbus Township Fire and Rescue in Indiana after approval, which is pending. You might recall a few months ago that the fire department suspended all underwater activities, and the dive trailer is going to the state police, and the equipment's going out to Ohio, so it finds another life. You can see under EMS that you've got some service milestones. Mr. Andrews and Mr. Middleton have completed 1 year of service with the fire department. Mr. Shane Gilbert is a new hire, full-time. He started on November 1st, and he's going through his field training, and he's on a shift with some veterans. Mika Eddy will begin full-time on November 18th. He will also be assigned field training portions, and he'll be partnered with other veterans, Alan Jarman and Eric Uphold. Mika, as well, comes with experience in fire service. Which department was Mika from? Oh, but he moved down here, yeah. So he's from Middletown, comes with a good bit of experience. Under training, the last training class was on November 3rd, where the topic was vehicle rescue evolutions, and we had 10 members present. The next training class will be next week on the 17th. The topic will be basement fires by the Delaware State Fire School. You can see another, the fire department stays very busy with other activities away from the fire the house. I will say that on the 5th, they attended the Wawa grand opening where they competed with Seaford Police Department and took home lunch, I guess.
The trophies in the station for you and
so,
from this office.
So if you want to see the trophy, you stop by the fire department. So, under important news, on October 30th, there was an accident involving Fire Police Captain Ken Tull. He was assisting the Bridgeville Fire Department, or Fire Company, with shutting down traffic at Camp Road and Cannon Road to provide protection while Station 72 worked a motor vehicle crash. Ken was struck by an impaired motorist while performing his duties. He was wearing his assigned high visibility vest along with all emergency lights and cones in place. He received several priority injuries and was transported to Nanticoke Tidal Health in Seaford by ambulance 72 and Sussex County paramedics. Ken was flown out around 03:30 hours to Christiana Hospital for to the Level 1 Trauma Center for further advanced care. He has gone through several surgeries, my understanding, in the CCU at Christiana, and he's receiving needed rest and rehabilitation at this time. Other than wanting to go back to normal, he's recovering. Please keep him and his family in your thoughts.
He was moved to step down today.
So that's good news. We're just informed by the chief that he was moved to a step-down unit today. So those are good signs for improvement. Got a report here from Police Chief Marshall Kraft for the period ending from October 25th to November 7th. You'll see the all crimes charts and incidents charts with the periods of time. We're 10 full months in and a partial month into the year, and we're at 5,197 total crimes for a total of 2020 of 5,803 crimes. So we're running pretty close to those averages. However, it's considerably below 2019 numbers. There were 165 total complaints in the criminal side with an overall clearance rate of 86%, which is an improvement over the previous period. Under traffic, there were 250 total traffic contacts, resulting in 58 citations and 12 warnings. 24 crashes, 1 injury, 6 non-reportable, and 17 reportable. An item of concern for the community is there were 6 hit-and-run accidents during this period and 1 alcohol and drug-related crash. There are a number of significant events related to getting some drugs and handguns off the street. along with some violent crimes that are of note. I'll let you read through all of those. And under training, the certified COPT, that's Council on Police Training, instructor training, was completed by Corporal Bradley. Is that senior corporal?
I believe that is correct.
Yeah, that's senior corporal. We downgraded him accidentally. Senior Corporal Bradley, and there was a mandatory first aid recertification, which was all Seaford PD members attended. The crisis intervention training was attended by Sergeant Justice and Lieutenant Miller, and the child passenger safety technician course was taken or augmented by Sergeant Mills and Patrolman First Class Hare. I believe, I don't see the chief here, Sergeant Mills became an instructor. Is that correct?
He did.
Yeah.
Chief did
It's
report.
not noted in the report, but it is of note that he is now a certified instructor, so that he can go out and instruct other officers in the safe installation of these devices. There is some news on the diversion program. The grant has been revised and resubmitted. It expired, so there's hopefully we'll have some news for you on the allocation of the grant that the chief and his staff have applied for. Those funds will go to divert criminal cases to mental health and drug rehabilitation rather than taking them through the criminal justice system, and help reduce the load on courts and the amount of load on service calls that police officers will have to do, that they can divert their energies toward criminal crime prevention and reaction. So with that, that's the end of my report.
Chief is passionate about that. He's put a lot of energy into that, so that's good success. All right, next we have Code, Parks and Rec. Councilman Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start off with Parks and Recs. They assisted prep with the Seaford Halloween Parade, and they participated in a total of 4 community trunk or treats, and they won second place for the best trunk at the Boys and Girls Club. And they made repairs to the High Street Bridge and closing lock both gates at Williams Park due to vandalism. And they are in the process of distributing basketball flyers to all eligible soccer participants. And they are working on logistics / planning for the upcoming caroling in the park at November the 29th. And they have submitted for reimbursement to the Urban Community and Forestry Grant through the state of Delaware for $3,000. And that concludes that report for Parks and Rec, and I'll switch over to Code. Wawa held its grand opening November the 5th, and it was an awesome turnout. They worked on the interior. They are working on the interior of Amazon, and that is ongoing, and stormwater being installed. Demolition of the old Dover's Pool is complete, and all permits has been issued for the new 7-Eleven, and all the work is routine. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Next we have a lecture. Councilman McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hit a few highlights. Since the last report, the crew has disconnected the old People's Building and for renovations. Greg Brook and Danny Perry took advanced defensive driving. Dylan Calloway took defensive driving as well. They started putting up the Christmas lights. In regards to our director, he had a standard director's meeting, staff meeting, and council liaison meeting. Had a pre-construction meeting for the Tesla project as well. Over the course of the next few weeks, going to continue to put up the Christmas lights, work at the Amazon site, continue working at the Wawa to run a loop feed to the front pole line, and get the bids out for the new chipper truck. And Chief, I want to let you know, during the Wawa grand opening, during the sub-contest, Councilman Holland had the police force. I had you guys. I want to let you know.
Thanks for letting me know.
That's right. That's right.
It's all good.
That's right.
Come visit the trophy council.
That's right. And that has been my report.
All right, finally, we have Public Works Wastewater, Councilman King.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report has been submitted in its entirety. I'm just going to go ahead and touch on some of the highlights. I'll start with the Public Works Department. So over the last 2 weeks, they had a lot of water-related issues. They've installed 2 water services in Bel Air. They repaired water leaks at the ballpark. They had to repair a collapsed storm drain on McKean. They were painting curbs at Bel Air and Crossgate. Repaired fire hydrants on Norman Eshbridge Highway. Had a lot of problems troubleshooting meter issues. And of course, the Public Works Department is still 1 person down. So if anybody knows of anyone that wants a job, please send them in. I'll jump over to the wastewater treatment facility. All is going well. Receiving flow from Bridgeville and Greenwood. Plant performance remains good. Some of the upcoming activities over the next 2 weeks, street paving bed work will start. Patch Shipley and South Market for Del Dot. Install remaining number 2 taps on Bel Air townhouses. Repair cleanouts and continue to work on the smoke testing list. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. In light that we've just gone through daylight savings time and 9 o'clock is the new 10 o'clock or vice versa, I'll accept a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, unanimous. Thank you. Thank you again, Chris.
Good night.